welcome to another webinar in our series, the Lady Leaders series, though I know men actually enjoy these as well. So this one is about, can we have accountability without being perceived as a witch, whatever word we want to use here. And so I am super excited. I have some of my just dearest people here. I have Dr. Risa Gardner, who is out in kind of the eastern part of Colorado. I know her well. Her and her husband have two separate practices in eastern Colorado. They are black belt level doctors. They run their practices super systematized. They have amazing overhead. And why I really wanted Dr. Gardner to kind of be on this webinar with us is it's been really cool to see her growth as a leader. She's incredibly humble and willing to share what worked and what she has found doesn't work. And so when she reached out to me with a few things, I thought, nobody better to really get to learn from. So thank you so much for joining us. We super appreciate it. And then many people know Miss Debbie Dodson. I joke, she's like literally my better half. She is the practice director for Castle Peak Dental and Avon Dental. She has helped me right alongside me growing these practices to multi-million-dollar organizations with multiple doctors and hygienists, which is no small feat. And her growth trajectory as a leader is something that I think that doctors can learn a lot from, because her leadership in and of itself is amazing and inspiration for even me. But then also, if you're looking to bring in kind of an implementer to your practice, or more of an office manager type position, Debbie is kind of considered one of the best in the industry, and her growth and her leadership is pretty amazing. So thanks, Debbie. By the way, she's in Puerto Rico, everybody joining us. So she's pretty awesome. And then everybody knows the GSD queen. Who doesn't know Miss Ashley Hirschfield? I love having Ashley on these. Everybody who knows Ashley, she is kind of like exactly what I think of when I think of somebody who can hold people accountable, be extremely candid, but not come across as witchy, I guess is the word we'll use, witchy at all. And so you're so valuable in all of these discussions because once again, you've seen more docs than I think just about anybody. So welcome, ladies. I'm super excited to have you here. We'll get started. I want to real quick, I'm going to start with you, Risa. Just tell everybody just a small, little bit about you, where you're at, your leadership journey so far.
Well, so I, like Summer said, and first of all, Summer, thank you so much for having us. Everybody out there, if you don't know Summer well, you should. She's amazing, and she has been a dear friend to us since we first started the group, and just a huge mentor and very instrumental in my growth as a leader. But a little bit about me. We have our two practices in northeastern Colorado. My husband works at Yuma Family Dental, and I work at Ray Family Dental. We're the only dentists in each of our respective towns, so it's pretty small. There's about 3,000 people in each town. We purchased our practices in 2014. We have one associate that we share between the two of us, and the nearest doctor besides ourselves and our associate is about 45 minutes away. Our closest specialist is an hour and a half away. So we kind of have to have, are forced to have a wide range of skill sets working out where we are. And we've kind of divided and conquered, where my husband takes on certain types of procedures and I take on others, and we refer back and forth to each other for those. We do not have an office manager because there's really nobody out there to hire with any experiences, not for dental assistants, for front office, for office managers. The only person that has experience is the dentist and the hygienist. So everybody's hired from scratch. So when I'm bringing my perspective, it's very, my role in the office is very, very hands-on. I don't have somebody else to kind of help me manage these things, which created a lot of chaos in the beginning. And we'll dive into that a little more.
Yeah, which I love that perspective, because there's more dentists than you know that will find that so valuable. So thank you very much for that. Debbie, go ahead, a little bit about you and your career in dental so far.
So I practiced hygiene for about 10 years and then got out of the dental field, believe it or not, got into the funeral business when I met my husband, and then got back into the dental field. On the admin side, I started out from scratch, learning from the bottom up, scheduling coordinator, insurance, and then just learned from there. Joined Summer U in 2014, and here we are.
Here we are. That's right. And then Ashley, usually we don't kind of give you an intro, but I want to know, how did you become, really kind of that COO position? I know, but for everybody who's listening, you had to truly grow into this person who had massive accountability over so many people. Tell us a little bit about that journey for you?
Sure. So I actually, like you said, lots of people know, but if you don't, I started out as Mark Costas's personal assistant, was literally picking up his dry cleaning and those types of things. But my office was in an old operatory and there was an exam light over my desk. So I learned by being just literally immersed into it and starting to listen to everything that was going on. And then, as, at that time, Dr. Costas had gone from selling a bunch of practices. And at that point, when I first met him, he was just at 2 practices and then went back up to 10 practices. And I just happened to be there at that starting point. And that I just, kind of grew into it by immersion. Did I learn about dentistry? I had an anatomy bachelor's degree, but other than that was the only thing dental wise I had anything close to.
Which is so exciting to think about, Risa, like you just said, is there somebody who has the brains and capability, of these 2 women that we're doing this webinar with, that, in towns like yours, they didn't have the dental skill. Well, Debbie did, but I should say Ashley didn't have that dental skill set. And look at the capabilities that she grew into. So it is definitely possible. And so what a great perspective you get to bring as well. But, to dive in, at some point, each one of you, when you were starting out, you either purchased offices, joined offices, grew into that leadership role. When you're walking into that kind of situation, for those doctors who, whether it be de novo, they're taking over practices, office managers who might be listening to this that are jumping into that role, where do you start? How do you actually gain people's trust? Where do you start? And Ashley, I'm actually going to start with you.
I think it starts with a lot of humility. By acknowledging things I didn't know. There was, a lot of there was some issues with some kind of jealousy stuff, because all of a sudden now I'm the right hand of the doctor, and where did she come from? She doesn't know anything about dentistry. But by kind of showing some humility and saying like, hey, I want to help you, and I'm here to take some stuff off of your plate, and help me understand, so this will be easier for you. And I know that you're better than me at this, and that got me I think a long way. To this day, his office manager, who was at the time, I am incredible friends with. We actually ended up living together for 3 years in that whole random time period. And I think that humility just really goes a long way when you're trying to be into a position that you are new at.
Absolutely. Debbie, you really did kind of slowly grow into that position, even within our organization 7 years ago. How did you gain the trust and respect of the people that at one point you were working alongside?
Gosh, I think just really for me, high personal standards is just so important. All eyes are watching you to see how you react to certain situations. And I agree with Ashley, humility goes a long way. I think it's great for the team to see that you can fail, but what you do on the other side of that failure, I think they're just watching you all the time to see how you react.
Yeah, which is both of those, humility and the ability to fail without having to flog yourself or trying to blame, is such a powerful thing, I think, for team members to get to see, because especially out of somebody who's one of the leaders, it gives them that safety zone to be able to say, okay, this is what I do with failure. Those are beautiful points, and I think so tied. Risa, how about you?
Yeah, it goes right along with what Ashley and Debbie were saying. I mean, I think trust is built on reliability and consistency. So as Debbie was saying, you need to kind of set your standards, develop your own personal core values. How do you want to treat people? What kind of person do you want to be? And you take those standards and develop your office core values as a team, and then live up to them, walk the walk and provide consistency. Providing consistency, I think, builds that trust. Your team is watching how you conduct yourself. And then also going along with what Ashley said, having a servant mindset, being humble. It cannot be like, what can this person do to make the office successful or make me successful? It has to be, how can I help this team member be successful? How can I support them? People feel like they can trust you when they feel supported.
Absolutely. Oh, I love all of those points. And sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I hear doctors or even new office managers come in and they're wanting to kind of lay down the law immediately. This is our collection policy. This is how we do it. This is what and I think what's hard is, those team members don't have that level of safety and trust. And so sometimes I think, along with humility and really everything we discussed, I find too, if doctors, especially if you're taking over a practice, having one-on-ones with every one of those team members to find out exactly what they do in their job with zero sense of judging, zero sense of anything other than tell me exactly kind of what you do in the practice, and really actually celebrating the things you're doing great, first off, before we ever launch into anything. And then, for me, what I would suggest too is going into those situations almost as a bystander, really watching what happens before jumping to any conclusions of what needs to happen, especially if, we're purchasing offices or acquiring offices, that things were going okay. There was some decent things happening. I think it's just important to sometimes just stand back, watch things happen before any perspective or assumption or whatever is even made. And I don't know if any of you guys have found that true. I mean, Ashley, probably well, taking over different offices, sometimes the coming in with the, here's the new policies, just can go over real stinky.
Well, and that's exactly, I think, to chime in there, I think what they're afraid of, right? If you are taking on a new office like that, people already have their guard up, right? They're like, oh gosh, here comes something new. And they already knew that probably things weren't ideal with the last owner. And then, so they're scared, they're thinking, oh my gosh, all these scenarios are kind of running through their mind. I love that point of like, hey, just let me sit back and watch, like, let's see how things are going. Tell me how things are currently going. The praise for things that you do see that are good, that goes a long way to kind of chipping down that wall. So then you can come in with well, how about we tweak this, and how about we do this? And then, helping to rebuild that culture and rebuild that, that team into what you want them to be. And sometimes not everyone is down for that, right? No matter how humble and, patient you feel like you are, sometimes it's just not going to fit. And that's just part of it too. Change is hard and not everybody likes it.
Absolutely. Well, and, to go along those lines, if you can be a bystander for a while, what I find when I just watch is there's always the big influencers in every practice. I want to find out who the influencers are. I want to find out who those people are who, when they speak, everybody else listens. Because sometimes it's for the good and sometimes it might be for not what you want. But I have found that if I implement too quickly and I don't get the right people on the bus initially, things can sometimes go sideways because I just didn't take more time understanding them before I tried to seek to be understood, I guess. So I do like the idea of just kind of being able to be that bystander, gain trust, find out who those influencers are, and then then start to deploy some of your things kind of slowly. But yeah, any other things that you guys have noticed or, would suggest is if you're starting out in, moving into that leadership role immediately, anything that you can add to it? Okay. We crushed that one, right? I'm sure we thought of it all, but so tell me, what you thought that you would do as a leader when starting in dentistry. I know for myself, when I knew I was going to kind of be that leader in the practice, I perceived it as one way in my head. Tell me what you thought you were going to go in and do as a leader, and what was some of the potential fallout or consequences of leading that way? I'm going to go with Debbie. Yeah.
Well, I just thought I could outwork everybody. I would be the workhorse. I would do anything and I would do everything. And just let the other team members see my work ethic. And hopefully they would follow along with me. The problem with that is I found out that I was doing most of the heavy lifting, and everybody relied on me to do that. And we're just kind of, either kind of hiding in the shadows, not wanting to rise up for whatever reason. But that's kind of backfired on me, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Risa, what about you?
Well, I did a lot of things wrong. My perspective comes from being not only just new as a leader, but being new to dentistry, being new to business. I had zero business experience, and here I was taking over a business, and new to leadership. I've never been a boss before, so I was green in all areas. I was fresh out of residency. So my idea of leadership at the time meant that I'm the boss and I'm entitled to a certain level of respect, and everyone has to do what I say, and I have to rule with an iron fist. So, that was my poor understanding of what leadership was. And on top of that, being new to ownership, I think it's important to point out that there are different phases of ownership in a practice, right? Because you're in a different state of mind at each point in your ownership. So it's like a relationship. In the beginning, there's lots of emotions, you're super excited. And then as time goes on, you kind of settle in and your state of mind changes. There's not so much emotion into it. There's not so much excitement. There's not so much fear. So I was entering at the point of ownership on top of, and being a new dentist. And what that meant was I was just very emotionally charged. I was overcompensating because of my lack of experience and lack of confidence. And so I transferred this expectation and this pressure directly onto my team. I gave them no direction because I didn't have any. I gave no positive feedback because I didn't even know what I wanted. And I only knew what I didn't want, and I was very good at expressing it. I remember the first year being there, I was standing in the operatory with my two assistants, and they were expressing concern that we were getting done at like 7 o'clock, 7:30. And our last patient, we're supposed to be done at 5 and out at 5:30. And this had been going on for a while. And they're expressing concern that they want to be home and have dinner with their families. And I remember standing there and I was boiling inside because I was already getting pressure from my husband at home to be home at a decent time. And here they are telling me the same thing. And I just didn't want to hear it. Like, didn't anybody understand we have to make money around here? So I remember saying to them, I was so emotionally charged. I said, this is the job. This is why I hired you. We stay here until the job is done. We have people to help. I just desperately wanted to see every single patient and make a good impression on the community. And I needed to make money, to be honest. So, I was new in ownership. I had all this debt. I had to pay the bills. And so my consequences of that were I hated going to work. I had a lot of employee turnover and I was miserable.
Oh, I remember that. And I even, like listening to it again, I'm like, well, one, thank you for being so honest about it, because so many people feel so much like that. Like when you were saying that, I was like, oh, yes. I wavered between rule with the iron fist and how can I be nice enough to you that like your loyalty and your level of service will just be awesome because I'm one or the other. I could never figure out where that happy medium was. So I'm like, that resonated, I'm sure, so strongly with so many other doctors for sure. Ashley, what about you? What you thought was going to be kind of that leadership hat and accountability was going to look like versus what it is now, and what consequences did you face?
So my story mirrors Risa's a lot. Now, I didn't have a whole practice, and even then, like with regards to the practices in dental clinics, I was coming up, and kind of working side by side to these people. So that was kind of a different dynamic. But when I got my own assistant to help with, just other aspects, that's where I was just like that with Risa, like Risa said, I was like, I'm the boss and I just, I deserve because I have this position. And the consequence was that this person came to me at one point and told me I was an absolute terrible human being. And I have never been laid into like that in my life. And I just sat there stone faced that she left. And then I just started bawling. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what have I done? And then of course, then it was like, well, you could take that, or first I got really defensive. I was like, she's full of it. She just doesn't want to work. She's lazy, all these things. Right. But then it was like, well, what if you just learn from it instead? And so I actually carry that experience kind of into a lot of different areas now. So.
Yep. Yeah, it is funny. And I find that it's not just women leaders, it's all leaders, that they can so easily vacillate between, like we were saying, the ruling with the iron fist and it's my way or the highway. And I find that often we have to use that level of control when, just like you said, Risa, we don't actually have crystal clear clarity of where we're going or how to actually empower other people. So that's really one of our only ways to get there, we feel like. Or we vacillate to being overly friendly and then doing like Debbie, taking on everybody's jobs ourselves because, well, multiple reasons. We're perfectionists, we can get it done right. We feel handcuffed that if we don't pick up so much of the load, these people are going to quit. So it's so often I hear that we vacillate, and accountability gets really just lost somewhere in the middle. And I think that, accountability and ownership are similar, but a little bit different. That, ownership is truly owning that position, owning everything that is encompassed around it. Whereas accountability and personal accountability can often just be to the standards of that practice. So sometimes people can be accountable, but fully owning an entire position, I find that can be a hard area for leaders to be able to even figure out how to empower them really in either or both of these areas. So I appreciate that level of honesty of everybody, because I'm sure that other people are sitting there thinking, yeah, that's me too. But this is a place that I really want to dig in a little bit deeper and spend a good chunk of the time, is knowing what we know now, that accountability and leading is not necessarily either of those. What measures, what things have you actually put into play that have helped you can see culturally leading to team members being accountable to at least just the standards, the checklist, the jobs? How do you have measures in place that you can see that accountability has changed? I'm going to actually start with you, Risa.
So what measures do we take now in setting up a culture of accountability?
Yes.
I think just setting clear expectations, and that comes in the form of, like we said, the checklists. We have end of day checklists, front office, back office, weekly team meetings where we do every single Wednesday for an hour and a half to 2 hours. We get together and we either do trainings. We use that time for communication and, accountability, morning huddle, monthly individual reviews. If you don't set clear expectations, there's nothing to be accountable to, right? So And you have to be realistic with your expectations. You can't set your team up for failure. So I borrowed an idea from one of the mastermind at our last mastermind meetings. I borrowed his monthly review form, and before our monthly reviews, like every employee would have to fill out this long form, and then we'd sit in there, we'd talk about it. And like I said, I'm the office manager too, so I was doing all of these, and there's got to be a better way. But it took forever, and I would have give them, there's a space on the sheet for them to fill out 3 goals and how they're going to accomplish it and the timeline, and and it was so frustrating because it was never getting, some of those things were never getting done. We'd meet up the next month and we'd go over it, and it'd be like, okay, what did we review last time? Which things did you accomplish? And it would be like they'd accomplish one or none of those. And so the story I started telling myself was like, they don't care. But in reality, I don't think that I was setting them up for failure. I feel like I was potentially giving them too much. And I've changed the way that I do my monthly reviews now, where now it's this form that I borrowed from someone else, where it's 3 questions. That's all it is. 3 questions, and then a job satisfaction rating, and then lots of positive reinforcement, lots of gratitude for the things that they are doing right. And then I give them 1 thing to work on, and they will review. And there has been a lot more response. And so I had been doing these things ever since we joined the mastermind, several years ago. I had all these things in place, my checklist. I mean, I was doing everything, but I still had people staff turnover. I still felt like such a witch. I still felt like I was micromanaging. And I think the missing piece for me that I've just recently come to realize is the gratitude piece. People just need to feel appreciative and appreciated. And so when you're constantly, telling them work on this, and, keeping them accountable for the things that they're supposed to be accountable for, they just feel like you're picking on them all the time. If you're not at the same time bringing in a bunch of gratitude and appreciation for the things that they are doing right. Mm-hmm. So
that's great. That's so good. I loved that. I loved that. Isn't that funny that accountability could actually be linked to gratitude? But it's just like anybody else, that until you know what you're doing well, you sometimes don't want to have to be confronted with what you're not doing well. That's such.
Can I just tack on to that too? And Risa doesn't have an office manager, but something I've seen work really well too. And I know, as you grow and if you do have an office manager, that's typically your direct link. But something that I've seen work really well is when, the owner or the dentist, takes at least once a day or twice a week, picks a couple people down the line. Maybe it's the sterile tech or something, just to be like, oh man, you're doing so great on that. And just giving them direct feedback and giving them that gratitude that they don't usually get from you one-on-one. That I have seen go a long way too, just to helping to build that culture instead of it coming just from the office manager all the time. People like to be seen and recognized for doing a good job. And if it's coming from the owner or the higher up or whatever, man, it can change a day and change a mood and flip something to where they're, wanting to try a little harder or do a little better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. Debbie, obviously I know what accountability measures you may talk about, but for everybody else, things that we've deployed over the years that have worked to help team members really be more accountable to their own position.
Mm-hmm. I think for us, it really all kind of started with our core values. We all know as a team individually what we're working towards and who we're serving. And we have all of those things, end of day sheets. We have a daily morning huddle. Each person knows what they're responsible for. If they come to those meetings and they're not prepared, there's a pretty quick conversation and just to redirect those team members. We have weekly accountability meetings, our bi-monthly or quarterly performance evaluations. We've now started posting our end of day sheets on Slack so that everybody sees those end of day sheets coming through. And each team member really knows what it takes for them to feel like they have a good day. And I think we're pretty good as a team to commend those team members. And we do start with gratitude as well. Yeah, I think, just like I said, the key part for us, I think, is we know what we're working towards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody knows kind of the direction we're rowing, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, what about you? I mean, what things have you found can help with accountability, whether it be within practices or you just in leading the people you lead?
I think with regards to like the reviews, right, and that type of thing, something that I've seen be very effective are when you allow your team to review you as well. You know, that kind of, it's humbling, right? But it's, you know, it's good to have that feedback, and it's good for them to feel like they can tell you, you know, things. And maybe it's you know, make them completely anonymous, set up a Google form, like they can, you know, it doesn't have to be, if it feels that scary in the beginning, it can be anonymous. But man, I think it just helps to cultivate that culture, and that yeah, just building your team, just showing them, you know, I'm playing right alongside you, and I want to know what I can do better too, and tell me, you know, how I can be better. Again, that, like we talked about, servant mindset and humility just can go a long way to growing your team and helping them to trust you. So I'm kind of a big fan of those as well.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. I love I love having feedback be completely circular in the office. The only thing I would add to that, and Debbie and I've talked about this, is that I think that everybody's opinion matters, don't get me wrong, but I think that sometimes where they sit in the level of accountability influences often the perceptions and feedback they're going to give.
Oh,
So
sure.
I think leveling to, like I tend to really talk to my leadership team and ask, what do you see that I could be more clear? What are you seeing that I'm not seeing? What blind spots do I have? What am I missing? Because I trust so highly their level of accountability. So I love, the whole 360 feedback review. And it's funny, this weekend I was texting with two other coaches actually about some of these things. And we all kind of went around of how do we get the best feedback from our own team members that's going to be highly accountable and actually effective. That's where it can get a little tough. So asking the right questions, I think, of the right people can sometimes be important. But, the thing I would say is, because right now there might be people listening that are like, okay, so what's tactical things that I can do? Where can I start? And I think often if you don't know where to start, it can be something as simple as beginning to use morning huddle prep sheets, end of day sheets. Those are usually the two areas. I don't know about, I see you guys all kind of shaking your heads, but I think those are the two areas I usually say can help move your office along pretty quickly and give people a level of accountability within their own position, what they can bring to the table. And I'm such an advocate of them not doing the paperwork to be able to do the paperwork. I did it. I filled it out. I checked it off. I want them to come to the meeting with pure intention of taking their position. And when they fill out that end of day form, they say, I won the day. I started the day with intention. And at the end of the day, when I'm filling that sheet out, I won the day. I killed it. Then they post it on Slack so that between the offices, all the DAs get to see, whoa, great job, Rachel. Wow, great job. You completed every checklist. You forgot, no missing items. So that's kind of where they get that instant celebratory type of feel. But they know that their team members are all getting to see what they're doing, including department heads. And I would say that that's been a key missing piece that we had, was we had the clear expectations. Debbie would check everything. But what I've decided is people enjoy being accountable to other people around them, even more so often than Debbie or myself. They like to be accountable because they don't want their other buddy to have to take on additional work, or, you know, the ripple effect of when somebody is not accountable can be more powerful than anything I say, if that makes sense. And so I think one key piece that is, you know, morning huddle prep sheets, you know, that's a simple thing that you can find probably all over DSN, by the way, is, you know, there should be a prep sheet per position. There should be an end of day sheet per position. And as these women are checking them off, some way that those are going to be audited. That's another missing piece that sometimes I see is we've got these clear expectations, we've got these sheets, but we don't have an audit system in there. So do they fill them out, and where do they go, and is anybody looking? And
Yeah,
so
I was actually going to say that. So what happens when they're making their checks? Like, who's actually checking that it's actually done?
because, by the way, I don't know about you ladies, Debbie, I know the answer. Sometimes people just check them off, and then until Miss Brittany just said to somebody, you check that off, but the lab cases weren't actually all sent. Tell me what happened here. And that's usually the phraseology we use is truly, tell me what happened. And then we usually go into, do you understand why, knowing that our mission is wowing our patients? Do you understand how this will go against us wowing the patients? Do you understand that? And the ripple effect is blank, blank, and blank. So for accountability, I think it's so much more, you know, it's like, let's have the clear expectations. Let's make sure those forms are audited. What happens when we find out that somebody wasn't completing what they were supposed to? Risa, what do we do, or what do you do when you're finding out, because you're having to wear many hats, what do you do when you're finding out that checklist and whatever's not being done? Because you face that.
Yeah, it's, well, first of all, you have to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. You can't just assume, oh, they're being lazy or whatever. You kind of have to clear yourself of that emotion, that just kind of that knee-jerk emotion that just kicks in when you see something isn't done that you know is supposed to be done. So you have to kind of switch your mindset, and then you go in questioning. You have to ask them, like you said, what happened? Tell me about it. And then from there, take it from there, whatever answer they give. If they give you a valid answer, like, oh, I completely forgot because I was doing this and this and this, and I was trying to help this person out, you try and figure out a way to help them troubleshoot it and correct it. But I think the key point when you're dealing with stuff like that, because it is confrontational, it can be confrontational, and you can be the bad guy, is that you go in questioning. Part of trust is assuming the most generous things about people.
Absolutely. We have the same philosophy, Risa, in our practices, is always start with benefit of the doubt, for sure. So, Ashley, what about you? If you notice, if somebody keeps coming to you with things undone.
So it's what I'd like to start with too is like extreme ownership model, right? So if I start there, am I not doing something to allow this person to do what needs to be done? Like, am I not giving them enough time? You know, is the expectation unrealistic? Is, you know, and if you come from a place like that as well, instead of being, you know, confrontational versus, which I've absolutely done and learned my lesson on, is, you know, it's on the list that you told me you got it done. Why isn't it done? You know, that's not going to go over as well as what can I do to help you get this done? What do you need from me so we can make sure that this gets done every day? Oh, I actually, you know, I need 15 minutes before the end of the day uninterrupted. Oh, okay. Like, let's talk about that then, you know? And that's been my go-to, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Love both those. Debbie?
Yeah, I agree. Just asking the question, what do we need to do? Or how can we make certain that this is done at the end of the day? I do want to say though, if you're just starting to implement these end of day sheets, you might meet just a little bit of resistance, and some people are naturally just going to check off those boxes and hope that nobody's checking. So you need to have somebody in place that's actually going to be checking those things, and they'll quickly learn, I think, when you go to those team members, oh, they really are checking. But again, give them the benefit of the doubt, make sure that you're asking the question to make sure that we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. What's the result that we want?
Absolutely. And Debbie, you just read my mind. It's like we share a brain sometimes. But, the thing is often, like I said, if all they're seeing is paperwork and they're not understanding the result you're trying to look for, I think that often is just frustrating and they feel micromanaged. And I find that's where we can get resistance too, is if we didn't in onboarding set the expectation of why we're doing these. Here's what the result we're looking for. And by the way, it has nothing to do with ensuring you're micromanaged, obviously. It has everything to do with the patient experience, the operations running smoothly, and really all of us to have a better experience. Once team members understand it, then they tend to be a little bit more participatory. And then we always say, and please, if you feel like you need to rearrange them, change them, do something different, if you need that 15 minutes at the end of the day, all we care about is you get this result by this length of time. How you get there, we're pretty cool with if you feel like for your brain, you need to change a little bit. Because I want people to have autonomy of that position. I want them to feel like they've got that flexibility. So accountability can often be allowing people that level of autonomy to get to the result how they want to get to that result sometimes. And I have found, I have so many brilliant people within the organization that they often get to that result in a way that we had never thought of before. And I love that and appreciate that.
And sometimes it's more efficient, right? Sometimes they will have done it faster or with less money or
Often. And it comes from some of the unlikeliest sources. So I never rule out that a brand new DA with almost no dental experience, they sometimes, them or sterile techs or people who've only been in the dental field, we had a billing supervisor now that she came into dental with no experience. She's had some of the coolest ideas of how to efficiently get to that result. It's so fun and I love it. I love getting those things accomplished by other people's brain power. The one thing that I will say that I think is an accountability piece that is extremely hard or was extremely hard in our organizations. I'd love to hear what you guys say, but I think it is profound. And I have to admit, I learned it from the Alistair McDonald. I can't take credit for this. But it really has worked so well for us is, we set that expectation. We tell them if it doesn't get done, here's guys, what's going to happen. Oh, shoot. We put that right out right away. So if we don't get this done, this is what's going to happen. And I don't want to see any of us have that happen to us because, that's going to be a stinky, stinky consequence. So when that person has that consequence, it was already discussed ahead of time. It's not this punitive, thumb on you. It's, gosh, you told me what was going to happen. Now I'm going to use Alistair's phraseology is they're feeling kind of the horns a little bit when that consequence is happening. Debbie and I and the department heads used to run in and we would try to somehow ease the pain of those horns. Gosh, so that lab case slipped through. The patient's mad. Let's put it on the front desk or have Debbie call and just make everything okay. And we used to say, totally, because we'll probably do a really great job of it. We can totally smooth it over, good job catching it. Well, that person never had to feel the consequence of what just happened. And so now we've gotten to the point of, shoot, if this happens, this is going to be the consequence. I don't want to see that happen. So do you have everything you need to ensure that isn't going to happen? Yes, yes, yes. When it happens, it's like, shoot, gosh darn it, that case didn't, come in, this didn't happen and this didn't happen. Tell me what happened. Hey, great. We're going to have you go ahead, call that patient, let them know what happened. And we're going to have you go ahead and figure out how to move that. You have people start to do that a few times. And by the way, I'm going to look at arrows. We do it to the doctors too. Because you know what, when doctors don't do all of the legwork that they need to do preemptively, it created a huge backlog in the billing in the front office. So we actually, keep tracking a lot of those things because what's brought to the light tends to change. When you keep everything in the deep, dark shadows, nobody owns up necessarily to anybody. So not enabling not enabling people, but truly calling them to a level of greatness and supporting them in it to where they know where that consequence lies, and then they have to experience that consequence, has been really changing for us. And Debbie, I would say it's been about a year maybe of us really switching our own mindsets from allowing them to kind of feel that, experience it, to, from where before we used to just jump in and we go ahead and just kind of fix those things. What's been your experience with it, Debbie?
Well, they don't like it too much, but gosh, if they don't feel the discomfort, if it's not hard for them, then they're always going to depend on somebody else to fix it for them. They're just not going to learn.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and what I have seen as a really cool side effect is their confidence grows.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't take from them that challenge, because when they've had to experience those horns, it's almost like not enabling them has made them stronger. It's just like all of us. And Debbie sent us all a quote this morning of like, when we've been forced through some of those fires, because we didn't have anybody to rely on, right? Look at who we became on the other side of it. I feel like I was inadvertently robbing team members of building their own confidence. And so I will say that that's a really huge accountability piece that we had been lacking, that I wasn't even aware of. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to share, when it comes to the measures of accountability, anything else that they want to touch on.
So that's actually something we do in our office, but it's more because I think my emotions got the best of me, but I was so angry that my assistants were having a hard time with getting lab cases out on time. And one time a partial got lost. So we're remaking a whole partial at our cost. And I was so furious. And my initial reaction was like, I need to call this patient, I need to smooth it over. But I was so mad that I was like, no, I'm not doing that. She's going to call the patient and explain what happened to the partial and what she did with it. She'd thrown it in the trash is what had happened. But she never did it again. And that's all it took. Is we've never lost a lab case again. And I think like sometimes you have to, whenever you want people to do stuff, you have to explain the why behind it, like you were saying. But sometimes, when they mess up, they have to feel the why. And it's just part
kind of
of
like touching a hot stove, right? You're only going to do it once.
Yes.
Right. You're only going to do it once.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to, the thing I say that with a slight bit of caution, that it doesn't mean shaming them in front of people.
Right.
That shame is the worst motivator ever. So I want to put that in there, that no, there's no shame to this. There is, and that's where if you set the consequence ahead of time, they knew this was the consequence. And if their actions led to it, you lovingly support them through it and say, gosh, I know this is hard. I'm sorry you're going to have to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and have you call that patient. And we can, after that, figure out what resources, what do we need to do differently? What do you need to do differently to actually have that not happen again? So that's where it definitely has zero sense of shame, and it is all just learning experience. And I just jokingly put in a post, like, fail fast, fail through it fast, get through it fast, and then pivot, move to the next thing, and help your team members do the same thing. Because genuinely the coolest thing, and I've seen it the most with the leaders, is when even with the leaders, because I used to enable all of that too. By the way, I'm sure that it was probably to some degree my ego that loved being able to solve problems. Well, the minute that I stopped solving all the problems and said, tell me, Allison, what would you do here? And then when she would do it, it didn't work. She felt like, shoot. I said, great, awesome. That didn't work. Now now do it, now what are we going to do next? And that's given me such freedom that I now have this whole group of people within the organization that can make some of these decisions. So allowing that accountability. So, moving through from clarity to auditing your system, to having those check-ins with your team members, to having good, conversations and feedback that start with, why and not who, going through all of that and then not enabling, but actually helping people to feel the consequences and helping them grow through it. I think that whole continuum can be so powerful when it comes to creating that culture of accountability. So can I tell you, I do know, moving from there, one question is, so you're like ready to go now. You're jazzed about it all. You feel like you've got this. You go into an office, and I think for sure, well, all three of you've walked into offices where you were the same age or younger than the people you were supposed to lead. Ashley, we only have about 10 minutes, but I have just another question or two. What do you do? Because by the way, that was a question posted. I'm younger than the people around me and I'm leading them. What do I do?
Was this a dentist who posted it too?
Yes.
Yeah. Man, and I think I keep harping on it, but just humility was just my biggest was just the best benefit I had there, was to just admit what I didn't know and to be gracious about the things they were teaching me, and to help try and help them understand, especially if you're an owning dentist. And and I have been an owner in a practice as well, and the dentist was like 74 years old. So it is challenging for sure. So I think it's just about presenting it in a way that's non-confrontational, but it's hard for sure, and it can be intimidating, and all you can do is just admit what you don't know, because that will go a long way to gaining that trust, and then them allowing you to start to implement new systems. And again, sometimes they just won't. Sometimes it'll be hard, and sometimes you're looking for new team members, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Debbie?
Well, I'm the oldest. I've always been the oldest, but I think if the team just sees that your motives are pure and that you really want the best for the patient, for the team, and just high standards, I think that goes a long way if you're working side by side and striving for that same outcome and result.
Absolutely. Risa?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I mean, I was 27 and I was the youngest one. And I knew nothing about doing hygiene checks, hadn't worked in private practice. And in hindsight, it was for me, a very ballsy move just to jump into private practice and take ownership right away. And everybody had more experience than me, and age was a big deal. I did try to roll with an iron fist in the beginning, but there was my hygienist and one of my assistants who had been there for 15 and 30 years respectively. And they would bite back. It was really hard for me to control that, because that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to control rather than lead, where I didn't enter it with open ears, listening, like, tell me, how do you do this? How do you run things around here? It was more like I came in like, all right, this is how we're going to do things. Listen up, everybody. And it just went over like a lead balloon. So having those, as I've become more experienced as a leader and as a dentist and a business owner, I have in place now, I've set my clear expectations, the values in the form, my checklist, the meetings, all these things. I set those clear expectations, and now I don't pay attention to age. It's not really a factor anymore. It's more their character and how they respond is what I'm paying attention to. So,
yeah.
Summer, I will say we do have a question, and I think it's a great one from Margaret here. And she says, I have a hard time getting the team engaged and finding a middle balance from super bubblegum nice to Medusa. So how do you guys find that balance in there?
Yeah, absolutely. Which that's such a great question. We kind of touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but Risa, kind of what was because you were one that pendulumed between. What was your strategy for finding kind of that ground of?
I feel like I'm just learning how to find that ground, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
7 years into it. In the beginning, I was ruling with an iron fist, and then I pendulumed over to like trying to become best friends. And then my assistant became my boss all of a sudden.
Mhm. Yep.
It's, gosh, it's just, I don't know that I have a great answer for that because I feel like I am in the midst of still learning.
Which I so love that you said that, by the way. Thank you for being so candid and honest about that. Because it is a tough thing. Debbie, what do you have, light to shed on that? Because you too experience that.
Mhm. I think clear expectations, standards, what result you want to get to, and never wavering in the standards that you want, showing the team the results that you want. I think it creates kind of a healthy fear. And I think the example that I want to give as a team member was managing the front desk at an office, and I was going to be there the next day. And she realized that things weren't how I wanted them to be. And she was like, I need to get on the stick. I need to get this schedule where Debbie wants it. I want it packaged up really nicely. I want it tied with a bow. So I don't know. I think you can have, I don't think I'm a witch. I think I'm respected. I don't know.
I was gonna say, I can't imagine being Debbie being witchy, but
no, she can just get real firm. So
I think it's really important what Debbie said though, and it's what, we said in the beginning, having your standards. And I feel like your standards need to be the same in your personal life as they are in your work life, because that's what makes you genuine. If they're completely different, then you're acting either on one side or the other. So you have to have those standards and you just stick to them. You don't have to try to be bubblegummy to your teammates because they're going to see right through it, or they're going to take advantage. Set your standards and just stick to them.
Yeah. Yep. And by the way, Risa, that's exactly what I was thinking was congruency. Is I think often we're emulating versions of who we think we should be, when really if we would get rid of all of that and instead just say, no, what do I want? What are the results I'm looking for? How clearly, am I showing the rest of the team that this is the direction I'm going? I think humility is so important, but I think that level of confidence in your own integrity, I think that is so important in your team, seeing that level of congruency. And, the one thing I would say, Margaret, too, is you can only start with you. So you start with you figuring out how are you the best version of yourself. And the coolest thing is that goes so along with the humility, is when they see you being better, I definitely feel like it makes other people around you want to either level up or level out. So you just being truly the better version of you every week, every month, one other thing that you can work on to be better will help you maybe not feel like you have to waffle between them. And by the way, you're probably, she says, wants me to stop apologizing all the time. Yeah, there's a whole book written about girls stop apologizing, I think. So you can go read that. It's a great book. It's about, we tend to apologize for everything. I'm so sorry that I want my dentistry to be good. Wait, what? Apologizing. It's your dentistry. You figure that out. So, I mean, hopefully, hopefully we've given you some areas. It is a really tough, ambiguous topic that so many people face, but you're probably already doing better than you think, merely because you care so much. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't have even asked that question. So you're probably doing quite a bit better than you think. So I'm going to just end with, what have you learned about leadership and accountability and working with other people? What have you learned, say in the last, 1 year, 6 months, whatever, what have you learned that you didn't know then and you know now, and it's made a huge difference? I know I'm going to give you a second. I see some eyes looking up to the left. We're thinking. No. Debbie?
I think just relax. You don't have to have an answer right away for every question. Just take a breath and try not to overreact, which I tend to do. And then come back to that person if they have a question. Don't try to be perfect. Just be human. Keep growing, keep failing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it. You don't always overreact, just saying that.
Just inside.
I know, internally maybe. Risa?
Yeah.
Gosh, I learned a lot. One of the major things is all of the people that I look up to as leaders, including you, Summer, is you guys have a major trait in common. It's that you guys seem to have really good control of the anger and irritation that you're feeling. You think before you speak. You're not afraid of a long pause, whether that be for seconds, for minutes, for days. You take the time that you need to process before you answer to something that you find irritating. You don't let your emotions drive your responses. And I think it's super hard because, especially as females, I mean, let's face it, we tend to be more emotionally driven than males, whether we like to admit it or not. And I think negative emotions can produce a lot of damaging responses and actions. And so I've learned to pause when I'm feeling completely pissed off and just let my emotions settle before I respond. And I think that's been huge. Another thing is the importance of trust, like we talked about earlier, between my team, amongst my team, between me and my team. And Brene Brown, have you guys heard of her?
Brene, yeah.
I love her. She has a talk on the anatomy of trust, and she talks about the 7 things that have to be present for there to be trust. And the one that I find the hardest is generosity, assuming the most generous things about people. In order for me to trust my employees, I need to be able to assume the most generous things about them. And it's basically just giving people the benefit of the doubt and stop making up stories in my head about why I think a person showed up too late or why they called in sick. Are they really sick? You have to stop doing that because, again, that's emotion driving your thoughts and the way you react. And then the other thing that I've learned is the power of showing genuine appreciation on a daily basis. And I learned this from reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is like super old school book and so it's funny to listen to, but man, it's got so many pearls in it. And the biggest takeaway is like, people in general want to feel important. They want to feel valued. And so in doing my monthly reviews, I had them review me, like you were saying, Ashley, and 2 people told me that they wanted me to bring back kudos at morning huddle. I used to give kudos all the time, like, hey, Karen, thanks for doing this or that. And people would just sit there and awkwardly be like, and I thought that they didn't like it. I thought it was embarrassing. It was awkward. So I stopped doing it. And 2 people in my monthly reviews, that's why monthly, like having your team review you is so important because you find out incredible things. So I started doing it again. And every morning at morning huddle, 2 to 4 times a week, I go through the list of everybody that's there and I thank them for something that they did in the previous days. Whether it's like Linda nailed her temp crown all by herself, the margins were money, Catalina stayed late and helped clean up when she didn't have to. Karen was so awesome to little Mrs. Jones and helped her step off the curb so she wouldn't fall getting into her car. And it's really created this culture of appreciation. And for the first time, my team has started thanking me for things, and that never happened. And so it's, I used to think, why am I thanking them for doing their jobs? Like, why do I need to thank them? I pay them to do this stuff. Or you have the thought that maybe if I thank them too much, they're going to think they're doing great and slack off. I mean, it's the total opposite effect. They want to do more. And I mean, if you think about us dentists, it's our job to create beautiful smiles. So when you put on those, 6 veneers on the front and the patient looks in the mirror and they're like, thanks, cool. That doesn't feel good. What feels good? It's when they have the tears and they're super excited. And that's our job. It's our job to do that. But yet that over appreciation just makes you feel good and drives you to do more. And it's no different with our employees. And so that's another major thing that I've learned this year.
Oh, I love all of those. And isn't it funny?
So
you cultivated the spirit of gratitude, and the vibe attract the tribe, and they gave it back to you. Like, how cool. Like, it started with you. That's so great. Ashley, what have you learned?
I think something I've learned is not to, the expectations is huge. Like if you communicate expectations fully from the beginning, then you have something to go back to, and you're like, listen, you knew what the expectation was. And then holding yourself to the same expectations, not asking, of course, to a certain extent, anyone to do anything that you wouldn't do, or of course, that's a little different in dental office, but you kind of get what I'm saying. It's kind of about going above and beyond, and just emulating the types of qualities you want to see in your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Ashley, I feel like I learned so much, and I'm not even kidding you. Like, I feel like I'm learning constantly, nonstop.
Yeah.
And what I would say for me that I have learned as I've been in the field for so long is that it genuinely does all start with me. The world changes when I change. And that means circumstances may never change around me, but when I choose to be better, when I choose to genuinely toggle up to truly what the highest version of me is, my world around me changes. And suffering occurs, when we refuse to just accept reality and the circumstances as they are. And the minute that I took that moment to just really fully, genuinely get better every single month, every podcast, every book, apply it to myself before I ever applied it to how do I use this on my team members? Like me being better all the time, or trying at least to be better, has changed everything for me. And I think for so long, I tried to change other people's behavior, when really all along, nobody changes their behavior, they do. Nobody changes their perspectives, they do. I just get to help them self-reflect. I just get to help them see maybe a better version of me that maybe helps them reflect upon their own version. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned, and I wish I would have started sooner. But I'm grateful for the opportunities, that I've been given now to grow and learn and things like that consistently. So any other takeaways, anything else, Ash?
Go ahead, Risa.
No, go ahead, Ashley. Go.
I was about to say no, I'm good, but so if you have something.
So that means yes, Risa, you first.
Yeah.
I just feel like I did everything so wrong from the beginning, and I feel like I'm 7 years later, I feel like I'm finally just starting to like my employee hugged me for the first time and said she was going to miss me today because I was going to be gone. And it's like, what? Like, it's taken me that long to figure it out. So if you're having a hard time, please feel free to reach out. But there was one other thing that I think is super important that I learned is leadership styles can vary. There's no one perfect way to lead. You don't have to do things the way that you think, someone else is doing them this way, so that's how I'm going to do it. Like, my biggest mistake was I think my husband's a wonderful man. I look up to him in so many ways, including like how he leads. And I always thought that like he does things better than me, and I got to do things, just as good or better than Ben. But I used to try and say the exact same things to my team the way my husband would say them to his team. And man, it just came off so bad. And I was, mistakenly trying to adopt the leadership style of him, and it wasn't me. And so to the person who asked, is swinging the pendulum from being too mean to being too nice, like, your leadership style has to mesh with who you are. You can't try and be something that you're not. And leadership styles vary. That's the other thing that I've learned.
Yeah, we take so much time analyzing what other people do and all the books and podcasts, and never actually take the deep work time to apply it ourselves and figure out where does that actually resonate within my own life. Such a beautiful point. Any last point, Deb?
I think just don't be afraid to show your humility to your team members. Don't be afraid to show that you too fail, and let them see that you learn from your failure.
Absolutely. Give them the safety to fail and move forward. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I am genuinely I just love this group of people so darn much. You guys are all so darn just special and inspirational in my life. And I'm grateful for what I am certain you gave somebody listening right now, whether it be hope or something tactical, or maybe just reassurance that they're not alone too. So thank you guys all so very much. Ash, anything else?
There's a link in the chat if you want CE for this webinar. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Ladies, thank
you.
Thank you. Deb, enjoy Puerto Rico.
I will.
Have a cocktail by the pool, sister.
Thanks,
right now.
Thanks,
Thank you, ladies.
everybody.
Bye.